What does it mean to have a voice? To have a voice means, and everyone knows this, to have a voice means to be heard and understood and then have some outcome from that understanding. To be heard, understood, and then have an outcome from being heard and that understanding. Now, there's many examples of people and groups of people having a voice. There's many examples of Indigenous having a voice. I'll just run through a few examples now. Now, years ago, when I was a young man, I travelled around Australia and I went to Ayers Rock. Ayers Rock now the name's changed to Uluru. And there's also sacred sites being achieved for the group of people. And there's also Aboriginal bodies, corporate bodies, Aboriginal bodies and institutions that can get things done. And the big one, I suppose, is, as an example, is an apology to the Indigenous people from our Prime Minister, which was Kevin Rudd at the time, for the stolen generation. An apology from the Prime Minister of this country. Now, there's many other examples of voices too. The feminist voice for equality there, and the feminism achieved equality. And there's many examples. You can go on and on of voices throughout this world, throughout Australia, and those voices being heard finally, and then an outcome being achieved because of those voices. Now, with the Aboriginal examples, how is this possible if they didn't have a voice? How are they able to change the name of the Ayers Rock to Uluru, Aboriginal name, without a voice? How do they get an apology from the Prime Minister of Australia without a voice? How do they achieve sacred sites without a voice? So they've achieved all these things, and even corporate bodies, legal corporate bodies, they've achieved. How is this possible without a voice? And many other things they've achieved. If they didn't have a voice, how is this even possible, is my question. So to ask the question, do you want the Aboriginals or the Indigenous people to have a voice, is only with the assumption that they don't already have a voice, like the rest of us. But obviously, as some of those examples that I've said, there is a voice, and they've achieved great things with that voice. Now, how do we have a voice? We have a voice as Australians via being Australian citizens. Through being Australian citizens, we know that Australia is multicultural, many nationalities in Australia. And as they become citizens, they enter the voice of the democracy in the society. When all the nationalities, when they get off their visas and actually become a citizen, no matter what nationality they are, they enter the voice of the country, of the nation, through their citizenship, through the ability to be able to vote through the democratic system that we have in Australia. Now, the Aboriginals originally did not have a voice, but there was a referendum in 1967 for the Australian people to say whether we wanted the Aboriginal people to be included in the democratic system and into that voice. And it was accepted. It was an overwhelming yes. So now, since 1967, which is basically all my life, they've had a voice. And through that voice, they've achieved many things. So if they're citizens, then we know that they have a voice, just like the rest of us. So when the government is saying we want a voice to Parliament to change the Constitution, a voice to Parliament, if they're already a citizen, they already have a voice to Parliament, even though it's not called that. Like, it's not called that for us either, for everyone else. But we've had that voice ever since we're citizens. And the Aboriginals have also had that voice ever since they were entered into the citizenship of the country. We've got the same voice. So to say we want to vote yes, to include them into the Constitution, to change the Constitution so they have a voice, is only with the assumption that they don't already. And they've already, as I've said before, achieved all these things. There's an example in Western Australia of the people there wanting to plant trees or do something with the shrubs and trees and things by a river in Western Australia. And what they were confronted with, they had to ask permission of an Aboriginal body in order to even plant the trees. So they've achieved that also. So if they have these voices, if they have this voice to this extent, obviously they've already got a voice. So therefore, what is this Parliament voice to Parliament? Well, it's not that. With all that they've achieved, it's got to be something different. And if it's to do with being original people, or if it's to do with being the first people, well, this history is not settled. There's many different theories on what the history of Australian Aboriginals are. I've heard history about a group of Indians that were down the south of India, Navidians, I think they're called, and which that was all part. They're all the same people have come across before there was water between Australia and India. So there's history of that. That means they weren't original. That means they come from India. And there's also history saying from Africa. And there's also many different theories, even theories about the Pygmies were first. So that means they're original or first. So my point here is the history's not really settled. The only thing that's probably more sure about who is original is we're all descendants of Adam and Eve. But it's not in our lifetime. Even the Aboriginals that are the first, it wasn't the ones that are alive now, it's not in their lifetime. They were born here, just like I was born here. And my parents were born in Australia. And my parents' parents were born in Australia. And my parents' parents' parents were born in Australia. But I'm not original. I'm just as original or first as anyone else, including the Aboriginals. We're all descendants of someone, and the most accurate or the most likely is Adam and Eve. We've all descended from Adam and Eve. But Adam and Eve weren't in Australia, so we've all come from somewhere through the nations, through generations, and ended up here. But through our ancestry. But that doesn't mean we need to claim any separate voice for any special group of people. That just means we're here now. We're in a democracy that is a democracy to give all the people. The Constitution says We the people. Not we the colonial people, not we the Chinese people, not we the Aboriginal people, not we the Italian people or the Greek people. We the people, the citizens of the nation, includes all the nations, all the nationalities that have ended up on this land. So it's not a settled thing as far as genealogies. It cannot be proven, or it has not been proven. There's many different angles where people have studied into the history. So that's another thing. Another thing was with contracts, like the Constitution is like a contract. And we all know, those of us that are smart enough or wise enough or clever enough will always know that whenever you agree to a contract, in this case it's the Constitution, whenever you agree to a contract or a change of contract or a change of Constitution, what do? What is the sensible thing to do? The sensible thing, they tell you, business people tell you, that you must do your due diligence. Check the pros and check the cons. The pros and the cons. Look at all the pros and the cons. Do your due diligence. And another thing we say is always read the fine print. So as we go into this referendum to vote this thing that we don't really know, what is the fine print? How do you do your due diligence? If you look into it, most people that look into it find that they can't really tell what it is. And when we look at what we've achieved in Australia, what the Aboriginal people have achieved, they've achieved fantastic, great things as a nation, as a people. So they already have a voice. But when you bring it back to the contract, like what is the fine print? What are the pros and the cons? And this is, we can't just go into a change of contract in the Constitution without having any fine print to even look into. It's like someone writing a blank check. Imagine writing a blank check, signing off a blank check, and you say you fill in the amount. Well, if we go into this and say we do vote yes without knowing the fine print, without doing our due diligence, without considering these things, it's an actual fact saying, I'll sign the check and you fill in the amount. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. And entering into any contract or any business contract or anything like that, we always got to look at the pros and the cons and read the fine print and adjust things. But this doesn't have that. It's just trust us. Trust us. If you're happy to sign a blank check and give it to someone to fill out the amount that can afford the amount, then go ahead and vote yes. But if you're a little bit wiser and you consider these things, not knowing what the fine print is, knowing that they've achieved all these things anyway, not knowing what the fine print, not knowing how you can do your due diligence, not doing your due diligence on it, what it actually is. If you feel uncomfortable with that, and be wise about it and look at it like we look at every other contract and other things like that, then vote no. But if you're happy to write a blank check, vote yes. Ultimately, it's all our choices. So I just put it to you now. If you're happy to sign a blank check, you can send it to me and you can vote yes in this referendum. If you're not happy to sign a blank check, you know what to vote. And this should be very sensible and a very easy way to look at it for anyone. Thanks for listening, guys.